Questions of Doom.
Hello and welcome back to another Questions of Doom. In this series, as ever, I attempt to answer questions that you send my way using the archaeosoup@gmail.com email address, as displayed on the YouTube channel homepage, but as you'll also see at the end of this video. In attempting to answer these questions by video, it is my hope that the answer is not only useful to the person who has asked the question, but also anyone else out there who may be wondering the same thing. Now, today's question of doom is quite an interesting one, actually. It's with regards to writing, and it goes like this. Dear Mr. Soup, you will notice that I am writing to you with writing. My question of doom is, how necessary is writing to a great civilization? When we consider the pyramids, the Roman Empire, and other great civilizations in history, we also think of their writing systems. Is this, in fact, diagnostic of a great culture, and a measurement of what they can achieve in the organising resources, labour, and building projects? Thanks, Kobe D. Well, Kobe D, you do indeed ask a fascinating question, partly because obviously you're asking about writing and its usefulness, but also you are implying that there is a definition to what a great civilization is, and asking, I suppose, in this instance, me to I suppose, define what greatness is, and whether or not greatness is linked with writing. Now, in fact, actually, this is completely the right house, as it were, to send this question to. Both me and Mrs. Soup really enjoy thinking about the origins of writing and the reasons for deciding to suddenly write down ideas, concepts, information, and so on. Mrs. Soup, in her first undergraduate degree, actually was very much interested in the origins of language. She was a philologist. In other words, she spent her time deconstructing and reconstructing languages and trying to understand how they relate to each other, and actually inferring previous languages and words for which there is no written evidence. So for her, in particular, archaic Greece, that sort of period leading into classical Greece, into sort of coming out of so-called Dark Age Greece and into a time when people actually were writing things down, is incredibly fascinating. For example, early writing, it seems, revolved around basically saying I was here, or actually saying this pot, for example, belongs to me, or this pot was made by me. Often actually it would be written from the perspective of the pot. Someone would be saying or rather the pot would be saying I was made by so and so. But really, writing actually seriously takes off in Greece, at least, on Crete, with Linear B and also Linear A writing systems. And as Mrs. Soup is very quick to point out, it seems that the impetus behind this is essentially taxation and storage. It's being able to keep a really good, accurate record of what goods and services you are storing, and what goods and services you are paying for. And in particular, the Palace of Knossos on Crete is really testament to the amount of information that people were trying to keep track of. Essentially, it's a palace and a warehouse built in one sort of Escher-like relationship. It's a very interesting construction, and it really relates power to having of things, and more to the point, knowing how many things you have. In order to know accurately how many things you have, writing is very useful. So Linear A actually hasn't been translated, but it probably also relates largely to counting and keeping track of goods and resources. Now, this relates to some of the earliest writing systems as well. Not that isn't early, that is early, but even earlier. For example, you have cuneiform amongst the Sumerians. They found themselves in a situation where they were having to deal with vast quantities of goods coming in from farms. They were trying to keep track of who was producing what, where it was being produced, and again, often linked probably with taxation and sales. And this is when cuneiform really takes off, or cuneiform, so really takes off. People are keeping track, they're doing mathematics, they're tabulating, calculating what people owe each other. And for this, again, writing is crucial. Now, all of these different civilizations and groups who have writing do share something, and that is that they do go on to inspire or directly create what one might term as being great civilizations. You know, you have Mesopotamia in that vast complex of cultures, building styles and pottery styles and language and music and art, which is linked to writing. You also have, for example, in the Mediterranean, you have the Greek and Roman civilizations. You have obviously in North Africa, you have ancient Egyptian civilizations. None of which you can really imagine having taken off without the ability to write down and pass on information in an effective and an elegant way. But is that what we mean when we say a great civilization? Yes, they build big things, but the culture itself is no more or no less complicated than many other cultures that didn't build quite so obvious things that you might point to and go, that's civilized. For example, you can think of prehistory. I mean, most famously, I suppose, Stonehenge. The amount of effort and people power that went into the construction of monuments like that in the Neolithic must have been remarkable. It is a civilization. It is people. I suppose if you want to define civilization, it's probably worthwhile thinking about it as being people who are willing to give up time towards a common goal. So, in that sense, actually, over the course of thousands of years, people were building towards a whole complex of monuments in and around Stonehenge. And as far as we can tell, this is without a formal writing system. Now, I'll come back to that in a moment, but the point is, we don't find documents like we do with cuneiform or with Linear B or Linear A. How they're organising themselves is an interesting question, but it's not necessarily what you might define as being a formal, for example, an alphabet writing system. And it's also worthwhile remembering as well that cultures who we now think of as being great writers didn't always have writing. For example, the Iliad was passed down orally from poet to poet for many, many, many years before someone wrote it down. The same goes for example, the Bible. Whether or not you believe the content of the Bible is nonetheless a massive cultural tome, a collection of stories and books and rules which were memorized and passed down over the course of thousands of years before, again, people started to write this stuff down. Also, for example, Beowulf. Yes, that is now a treasure of the English language, especially the written English language. But it for a long time was passed down orally. It was passed down from poet to poet in and around the North Sea, until eventually a monk, probably in East Anglia, I believe, wrote it down. So often these associations between a great civilization and writing, I think they're not an easy one to make, and it's very easy actually to start picking apart those ideas and asking questions such as, what do you mean by civilization? What do you mean by the writing? What do you mean by passing on information? You don't necessarily have to have writing to pass on vast quantities of information. Writing, it seems, is probably best when you want to be very accurate and very sort of what's the word? Be very able, as it were, to actually be really pernickety, really, well, to be honest, really anal about about how much, for example, people owe you in terms of tax, or how much you're storing in your warehouse, this kind of thing. It's also briefly worthwhile mentioning, and this is where we come back, I suppose, to the Neolithic and Bronze Age and so on with monuments, is that you don't have to have an alphabet to pass on information in some sort of written form. I'm thinking here actually of Aboriginal message sticks. Now, these message sticks, for the most part, are about 20 to 30 centimetres long, and they have a selection of marks on them, sometimes dots, sometimes etchings, like slices or diagonal lines, this kind of thing. And what they are is, in effect, what some people have termed letters. They are short messages passed from one person or one tribe to another. Often the person delivering the message would be given special rights, special access to land in order to get the message, where it has to go. But it's not a writing system, again, as we would necessarily immediately recognise it. Either it relies on the recipient understanding what was being written down, or it sort of acts as a prompt, an aide-memoire, as it were, for the person who's delivering the message, so that the postman can turn up, look at it, and go, oh yes, that's it, yes, the message is as follows, and be able to recite the message, which they already kind of know anyway, but use the marks on the stick as a prompt. This non-alphabetic, I suppose, writing style, this conveyance of information, isn't necessarily what it seems you're referring to, Kobe D, when you talk about writing, but it is nonetheless a very effective way of passing on information. And who's to say that the people who planned monuments, for example, like Stonehenge or whatever, that they didn't pass on information amongst each other from one tribe, one group, one hamlet or village to the next in a similar way, either aided by the postman, as it were, aided by the person who's delivering it, so that they can actually fill out the blanks and deliver it verbally, or actually just a writing system which is not, as I say, not based on some sort of alphabet. And I suppose this is really where, again, I come back to the nature of your question. You're sort of saying, is this a diagnostic of a great culture and a measurement of what they can achieve? And I suppose actually the answer would both be yes and no. It's undeniable that writing and people who started writing and who continue to write in history and in the past achieved great things. That's undeniable. And actually, for the most part, we know about these great things because they wrote about them. I mean, for example, I don't know, Augustus writing his list of achievements, was it the Res Gestae or Gestae, on his death. We know so much about him because, well, he wrote an awful lot about himself, or asked other people to write about him for him. So it's undeniable that writing and conventional ideas of greatness go hand in hand, absolutely, and the capacity to pass on information in an elegant and an efficient way is aided certainly by the tool that is writing. But many people would also say that great civilizations, civilizations in terms of great cultures, not just great building projects or great cities, do not have to have writing at the heart of them, and don't have to have writing at the beginning of them. So as I say, when you look at Mesopotamia, the beginnings of that isn't necessarily aided by writing. It speeds up with writing, certainly. Or when you look at, as I say, monuments from the Neolithic, the effort that goes into those things wasn't necessarily aided by writing, but nonetheless is an achievement. No one goes to Stonehenge and goes, pfft, it's a bit rubbish, isn't it? People are impressed by this stuff, and there's not an alphabet to be seen, or yet, as it were, as far as we're aware. So hopefully this has gone some way to answering and I suppose deconstructing your question, Kobe. I hope it's been a useful discussion, and I'm sure people out there will have something to add to this. So please do comment below if you have any thoughts or ideas that you would like to add. It is a very interesting question, and it goes to the heart of actually I think one of the great assumptions that modern people make about the past, and that is that what enables us to be a capable, useful human being must be what enables others to have been capable and useful human beings in the past. And while that is true, it's not always the case. And just because for example, I could not possibly remember all of Beowulf, or the Bible, or the Iliad. I could not. I couldn't. I don't think at the moment anyway. But clearly, there is a capability there for people to remember vast quantities of information and to pass that information on fairly accurately, without a writing system. So therefore there is that assumption that people seem to put back into the past, that without writing things were less good people were less civilized, people got more things wrong, as it were. But that's not necessarily the case, and hopefully this conversation has gone some way to sort of underlining that. Anyway, thank you, Kobe D, so much for sending in that question. I really enjoyed thinking about it and mulling it over with Mrs. Soup. And hopefully this has been a useful answer anyway. As ever, if you have any questions that you'd like me to tackle, please do send them in. I have got quite a backlog at the moment. I'm going to start making my way through those questions of doom that are currently in the inbox, as it were. But if you have any, please do send them in. And as I say, do comment below. Do add to this conversation because it's a fascinating question and topic. So there you have it. As ever, until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.